Napoleon Bonaparte is often remembered for his legendary battles across Europe, where his tactical genius and ambition changed the course of history. But in 1798, he set his sights far beyond the familiar fields of Europe, launching an audacious campaign in Egypt, driven by dreams of Eastern glory and conquest. Inspired by the legendary exploits of Alexander the Great, Napoleon envisioned himself as a new conqueror, leading his army into the heart of the ancient world, determined to carve out a new empire. The Battle of the Pyramids stands out as the most iconic moment of this campaign, often portrayed as a straightforward victory of modern tactics over the forces of the past. Yet, beneath the surface, the reality was far more tangled, a tale woven from ambition, miscalculation, and deep cultural misunderstandings that would haunt the French. Napoleon risked not only his army but also his reputation and future, gambling everything on this bold move, seeking not just a military victory, but the foundation of a new empire in the East. What drove him to take such a monumental risk, and what did he hope to achieve in this foreign land? What truly unfolded near the pyramids, beyond the legends and the paintings? And why did this apparent triumph ultimately lead to a strategic disaster for Napoleon and his men? To uncover the answers, we must look past the heroic images and delve into the motivations, the missteps, and the harsh realities that shaped this extraordinary campaign. Napoleon's Egyptian adventure is a powerful lesson in how a single, glorious event can conceal a far more complicated and cautionary truth about ambition and the limits of power. In the late 1790s, France was at war with Britain but couldn't invade directly due to the Royal Navy's dominance. The Directory needed a way to strike at British interests, and Egypt was the key, lying on the trade route to India. Officially Ottoman, Egypt was ruled by the Mamluks, but its strategic value was immense. By seizing Egypt, France hoped to disrupt British trade and threaten its empire. For Napoleon, it was also a chance for personal glory and escape from Paris's political chaos. The campaign wasn't just military, it was scientific. Napoleon brought a corps of scholars to study and document Egypt. This civilizing mission helped justify the invasion to the world. In May 1798, a massive French fleet set sail, carrying nearly 40,000 soldiers and over 160 savants. The journey was perilous, with the British Navy hunting them across the Mediterranean. The dream of an Eastern empire began with danger at every turn. The French landed in Egypt, their ships cutting through the Mediterranean surf as thousands of soldiers stepped onto the hot, unfamiliar sands. It was the beginning of a bold campaign, one that would test the resolve and ingenuity of both invaders and defenders. Awaiting them were the Mamluks, a warrior caste famed for their dazzling horsemanship and fearsome cavalry charges. Mamluks were elite horsemen, trained from boyhood in the arts of riding and swordsmanship, their lives shaped by a code of honor and personal valor. Yet their tactics were rooted in the past, focused on individual acts of bravery and single combat, rather than the coordinated strategies of modern warfare. Their army lacked organized infantry and effective artillery, relying instead on the speed and shock of their cavalry to overwhelm opponents. The thunder of hooves and the gleam of curved swords were their trademarks, but these alone could not guarantee victory. The French, by contrast, were a disciplined, revolutionary force, battle-hardened veterans organized into divisions, skilled in coordinated tactics and drilled to act as one. Their strength lay in their well-trained infantry and the use of mobile artillery, which could be rapidly repositioned to support their advances. They fought as a unified machine, each soldier a part of a larger, relentless force moving across the desert. But the French faced their own daunting challenges: the relentless heat, uniforms ill-suited for the desert, outbreaks of disease, and a vulnerable supply line stretching back to the coast, threatened by raids and the harsh environment. The Mamluks, on the other hand, fought on home ground. They knew every dune and oasis, every trick the desert could play. The French were invaders in an alien land, struggling to adapt to the unfamiliar climate and terrain. The coming battle would be a clash of two military philosophies: individual heroism and tradition versus collective discipline and innovation. Both sides underestimated the other, each confident in their own strength and dismissive of their opponent's methods. This mutual misjudgment set the stage for a dramatic confrontation that would echo through history. The outcome would hinge not just on courage or numbers, but on adaptability, leadership, and the ability to learn quickly in the chaos of battle. The unforgiving desert would test both armies to their absolute limits, pushing men and horses to the brink. As dusk fell over the battlefield, the fate of the entire campaign, and, perhaps, The future of Egypt hung in the balance. The French saw themselves as liberators, bringing Enlightenment ideals to Egypt and overthrowing tyrannical Mamluk rule. Napoleon issued proclamations respecting Islam, hoping to win local support, but Egyptians viewed the French as foreign Christian invaders, not saviors. The Mamluks, for all their flaws, were Muslim rulers. The French were outsiders disrupting tradition. French attempts at reform were met with suspicion and resistance. Meanwhile, the Mamluks dismissed the French infantry, believing only cavalry mattered in battle. They underestimated the discipline and firepower of the French squares. Both sides misunderstood each other, culturally and militarily. The Mamluks prepared for a glorious cavalry charge. The French braced for it with calculated defense. The battle would not be about individual heroics, but about which system could adapt and prevail. Misconceptions on both sides would shape the outcome. The clash was as much about world views as weapons. Facing overwhelming Mamluk cavalry, Napoleon abandoned traditional tactics. He formed his army into massive divisional squares, hollow rectangles bristling with bayonets and muskets. Each square was a mobile fortress, able to defend from any direction. Artillery and cavalry were placed inside, protected, and ready to respond. This formation neutralized the Mamluks' greatest strength, the cavalry charge. The squares moved steadily, supporting each other with overlapping fire. Discipline and collective action replaced individual heroics. Napoleon's tactic turned a weakness, lack of cavalry, into a decisive advantage. The Mamluks saw not vulnerable lines, but impenetrable blocks of steel and fire. The stage was set for a confrontation between ancient tradition and modern innovation. The outcome would redefine the nature of battle in Egypt. On July 21, 1798, the French army approached Cairo, with the pyramids looming in the distance. Napoleon famously told his troops, 40 centuries look down on you. Murad Bey commanded the Mamluk force, 6,000 elite cavalry, and a larger, poorly organized infantry at Mbaba. Confident in his horsemen, Murad unleashed a massive cavalry charge. The spectacle was breathtaking, but the French squares held firm. Volley after volley of musket fire and devastating grapeshot tore through the charging Mamluks. The cavalry's momentum broke against the disciplined French formations. Mamluk bravery was undeniable, but it wasn't enough. The French advanced, overrunning the fortified camp at Mbaba. The Mamluk army collapsed. The French victory was swift and overwhelming. The Battle of the Pyramids became a symbol of modern tactics triumphing over tradition. But the real challenges for Napoleon were just beginning. The Battle of the Pyramids was a stunning victory. Mamluk power shattered, Cairo opened to the French, but conquering a city was not the same as conquering a country. Napoleon's control barely extended beyond his soldiers' muskets. Egyptians saw the French as occupiers, not liberators. Uprisings and guerrilla attacks erupted. The Mamluks, though defeated in battle, waged a relentless guerrilla war from the countryside. The French army, built for set-piece battles, struggled with endless insurgency. Victory on the battlefield did not translate to lasting control. Napoleon's strategic goals, securing Egypt and threatening British interests, remained out of reach. The campaign became a lesson in the limits of military power. Winning a battle is not the same as winning a war. Napoleon's dream of empire began to unravel. The greatest challenges were yet to come. As Napoleon celebrated on land, disaster struck at sea. The French fleet, anchored at Aboukir Bay, was caught off guard by Admiral Nelson's British Navy. Nelson exploited a gap, attacking the French from both sides in a daring nighttime assault. The Battle of the Nile was brutal. French ships destroyed one by one. The explosion of the flagship L'Orient sealed the French defeat. By morning, almost the entire French fleet was lost. Only a handful escaped. Napoleon's army was now stranded in Egypt, cut off from France. Supplies, reinforcements, and communication were gone. The British controlled the Mediterranean, reversing the strategic situation. The victory at the pyramids suddenly seemed hollow. Napoleon was master of Egypt, but now a prisoner of his own conquest. The dream of an Eastern empire was slipping away. Trapped in Egypt, Napoleon found himself surrounded by enemies on all sides. He faced not only open revolt from the local population, but also a relentless guerrilla war that sapped the strength and morale of his troops. His ambitious campaign into Syria ended in disaster. With disease, and fierce resistance decimating his forces and shattering any hope of victory. Realizing the cause was lost and his position untenable, Napoleon made a fateful decision. Under the cover of darkness, he secretly abandoned his army and returned to France, leaving thousands of his men stranded in a hostile land. The abandoned French forces, cut off from reinforcements and supplies, endured unimaginable hardship. Against all odds, they managed to hold out for 2 more years before finally surrendering to the British and Ottoman forces. For France, the Egyptian campaign was a costly and humiliating failure, an entire army and fleet lost, with no strategic gain to show for the sacrifice and suffering. Yet, upon his return, Napoleon skillfully spun the story as a personal triumph. He used his reputation as a daring leader to captivate the French public and quickly seized power, becoming first consul of France. The campaign's true legacy, however, was scientific. The team of savants who accompanied the army made groundbreaking discoveries, most famously the Rosetta Stone, which would revolutionize the study of ancient Egypt and unlock the secrets of hieroglyphs. Their monumental work, the Description de l'Egypte, became an invaluable record of the country's history, culture, and monuments, inspiring generations of scholars and explorers. The Egyptian adventure proved that battlefield glory does not guarantee strategic success. Temporary victories can mask deeper failures and miscalculations. Napoleon may have won battles, but he ultimately lost the campaign, and failed to truly understand the land and people he sought to rule. Yet, out of this failure emerged both political power for Napoleon and a new era of discovery for the world, as the knowledge gained in Egypt spread across Europe. The story reminds us that history's lessons are rarely simple. True victory is never just about the battlefield. It is about understanding, adaptation, and the legacies we leave behind. The Egyptian campaign remains a cautionary tale of ambition, misunderstanding, and unintended consequences, a reminder that even the greatest leaders can be humbled by the lands they seek to conquer.